Hello, and welcome to Boring History for Sleep. Find a comfortable position, let your muscles soften, and allow the noise of the modern world to recede. Tonight, we travel back in time, not to a battlefield or a king's court, but to the narrow, muddy streets of Colonial Boston. We are setting aside the grand speeches and the revolutionary fervor that often define this era. Our focus is quieter, more humble. We are seeking the gentle, flickering light at the heart of the 18th century home. We are going to explore a world of wax and tallow, of patient labor and essential craft. Our journey will begin in the workshop of a candle maker, a place of strange smells and endless repetition. From there, we will meet one of Boston's most famous artisans, long before his midnight ride made him a legend. We will dive deep into the ocean to uncover the secret ingredient that lit the finest homes, and finally, we will settle into a colonial parlor to see how this simple flickering light shaped an entire world of leisure and society. There is no need to hold on to every detail. Simply let the story be a soft, steady presence in the room, a gentle guide to a time long past, and a peaceful companion as you drift towards sleep. Our story begins now in the dim light of a workshop with a smell you will never forget. Imagine yourself in Boston in the year 1760. You are a chandler, a candle maker. Your world is a small, timber-framed workshop on a crowded lane not far from the docks. The day begins long before the sun, in the damp chill of a coastal morning. The first task is always the same, coaxing the embers in your hearth back to life. A steady, low fire is the engine of your entire enterprise. The air in your workshop is thick with a unique and pervasive scent. It's the smell of tallow-rendered animal fat, the primary ingredient for the common man's candle. It is a heavy, greasy, slightly cloying odor, reminiscent of old meat left simmering too long. You are so accustomed to it that you barely notice it, but it clings to your clothes, your hair, and the very walls of your shop. Your raw materials arrive in large, solid cakes. This is soot, the hard fat from around the kidneys of cattle and sheep, purchased from the local butchers. It's a byproduct, a humble substance that you will transform into light. You use a mallet and chisel to break the cold, waxy blocks into smaller chunks, a dull, thudding sound in the quiet of the morning. The pieces go into a large copper cauldron suspended over the fire. And now the waiting begins. You must tend the pot with patience, stirring the melting tallow with a long wooden paddle. The fat slowly liquefies into a bubbly, golden brown liquid. Impurities, small bits of gristle and dirt rise to the surface, and you meticulously skim them off with a ladle. This process is crucial. Clean tallow makes for a better, more slowly burning candle, but it is also a source of constant, low-grade anxiety. The cauldron of hot, liquid fat is a profound fire hazard in a city built almost entirely of wood. A moment of inattention, a sudden boil over, could be catastrophic. While the tallow melts, you prepare the wicks. You take spools of cotton or perhaps milkweed floss, twisting and braiding the fibers into uniform lengths. A good wick is essential. If it's too thick, the candle will smoke and sputter. If it's too thin, the flame will be weak and may drown in its own wax pool. Once the tallow is fully rendered and skimmed, the true labor of the day commences. You take a device called a dipping rock or a modin, a simple wooden frame, from which dozens of wicks hang, suspended and weighted. You lift the frame, your arms already anticipating the familiar strain, and perform the first dip. You submerge the wicks into the hot, liquid tallow, then slowly and steadily lift them out. They emerge coated in a thin, greasy layer. You hang the rock on a rack to cool. The air must be just right to warm, and the layers will not set. To cold, and the wax will crack. As the first batch cools, you might begin on a second, and so the cycle begins. Dip, raise, cool, repeat. Each dip adds a minuscule layer of fat to the growing candles. To create a standard taper of a respectable thickness requires dozens upon dozens of repetitions. It is a slow, meditative, and physically taxing process. Your arms and back settle into a familiar ache. The motion is everything. It is the rhythm of your profession. For a finer product, you might use molds. These are sets of pewter or tin tubes, arranged in a frame. You carefully thread a wick through each tube, securing it at the top and bottom. Then, with a steady hand, you pour the hot tallow from a dipper into each mold. This is faster than dipping, but requires more expensive equipment and a different kind of precision. Once filled, the molds must be left to cool completely for hours. Extracting the finished candles without breaking them is a delicate art. As the day wears on, the workshop fills with your finished work. Racks upon racks of pale, off-white candles hang from the ceiling beams like strange, waxy icicles. They represent hours of monotonous, careful labor. But the work isn't done when the candles are made. Now, you must sell them. You might have a small counter at the front of your workshop, but many of your sales are made out in the city. You pack your wares in a wooden box and become a salesman. Imagine the streets of Boston, unpaved, rutted, and thick with mud or dust depending on the season. The air is filled with the sounds of horse-drawn carts clattering on the few cobbled sections, the cries of other vendors, and the smell of salt air mixing with wood smoke and manure. You go door to door, selling to housewives, tavern keepers, and the clerks of counting houses. Everyone needs light, but everyone also wants the lowest price. Your tallow candles are the cheapest option, but they are also the least desirable. They gutter, they smoke, and they give off that same familiar, greasy smell as they burn. Still, they are essential. At the end of the day, you return to your workshop, hopefully with a few shillings in your pocket. You clean the cauldron, prepare your wicks for the next day, and bank the fire. The smell of tallow is the last thing you notice as you close up shop, and it will be the first thing that greets you in the morning. It is the smell of your livelihood, a constant reminder of the endless, unglamorous cycle of boil, pour and repeat. The world of the Colonial chandler was one of many. His workshop, with its unique smells and repetitive tasks, was just one small node in a sprawling network of artisans and tradesmen who formed the backbone of Boston. These were the men who built the city, furnished its homes, and clothed its people. Their lives were a testament to skill, patience, and the quiet dignity of a trade well learned. To understand this world more deeply, we now turn from the general to the specific. We step into the workshop of a man whose name would one day become synonymous with a midnight ride and a call to arms. But long before that famous night, he was simply one of Boston's most respected and versatile craftsmen. We are going to meet Paul Revere, the silversmith. Imagine Paul Revere's workshop, not far from the chandler's, yet a world away in scent and sound. Here, the heavy, greasy smell of tallow is replaced by the sharp, almost clean scent of heated metal, beeswax polish, and the faint acidity of pickling solutions. The dominant sounds are not the squelch and bubble of the cauldron, but the rhythmic, precise tapping of a small hammer on silver and the quiet, abrasive scratch of the engraver's burin. Paul Revere was born into his trade. He inherited the silversmithing business from his father, Apollos Rivoire, a French Huguenot immigrant who had anglicized his name. By the 1760s, Revere was a master of his craft, a respected member of Boston's artisan class, and the head of a bustling household and workshop. His day, like the chandler's, began early, but his work demanded a different kind of focus. It was a craft of precision and artistry. Picture him at his bench, the morning light from a multi-paned window falling on his hands. Perhaps his first task is to melt down a client's old silver coins or worn-out spoons in a crucible, the intense heat turning solid metal into a shimmering, liquid mirror. This molten silver is then poured into an ingot mold to cool, the first step in creating something new. The real artistry began with a hammer. To make a bowl or a coffee pot, he would take a flat, round disc of silver and begin the painstaking process of raising. This involved hundreds, even thousands, of carefully placed hammer blows, working the metal from the outside in over a series of anvils and stakes. It was a slow, percussive alchemy, transforming a two-dimensional sheet into a three-dimensional vessel. The sound of it would have been of familiar music in his neighborhood, a steady, ringing tap-tap-tapping that spoke of patience and immense skill. Each blow had to be just right to shape the metal without thinning it too much or making it brittle. But Revere's reputation rested as much on his engraving as his smithing. Imagine him now, his work shifted from the noisy forge to the quiet bench. He sits hunched over a finished silver teapot, its surface polished to a brilliant shine. In his hand is a burin, a simple tool with a hardened steel tip. With immense concentration and a perfectly steady hand, he begins to cut into the silver. A whisper of metal on metal is the only sound as he carves an intricate floral design, a family's coat of arms, or the delicate lettering of a name. This was work that could not be rushed, where a single slip of the hand could ruin hours of labor. The light from a nearby candle, perhaps one purchased from our chandler down the street, would have been essential for this fine, detailed work as the day wore on. Revere was also a practical and innovative businessman. He did not limit himself to silver. He understood the need to diversify. He became one of colonial America's finest copperplate engravers, creating everything from illustrations for books and magazines to business cards and official seals. He also produced political cartoons, sharp visual arguments that supported the Patriot cause, which were printed and distributed throughout the city. In a perhaps surprising turn for a man who worked with precious metals, he also practiced dentistry. He didn't pull teeth, but he crafted false ones, carving them from hippopotamus ivory and wiring them into the mouths of his wealthy clients. It was another form of intricate, skilled handiwork that supplemented his income. His life was not just the sum of his trades, it was also the management of his household. The workshop and home were often one and the same. Apprentices, young boys learning the trade, would live with his family. They would perform the menial tasks, stoking the fire, polishing finished pieces, running errands in exchange for learning the secrets of the craft. Revere was responsible for their training, their housing, and their moral upbringing. It was through this life as a tradesman that his revolutionary career was forged. The artisans of Boston were a close-knit community. They relied on each other for raw materials, for specialized skills, and for business. Revere bought his charcoal from a collier, his tools from the blacksmith, his candles from the chandler. He sold silver buttons to the tailor and engraved plates for the printer. This web of commerce was also a web of communication and trust. They met in taverns like the Green Dragon, which became known as the headquarters of the Revolution. But at first, these were simply meetings of peers, men sharing news, discussing politics, and forming associations to protect their economic interests against British policies that they felt were strangling their livelihoods. Before they were the Sons of Liberty, they were the city's master craftsmen. Revere's reliability, his network, and his reputation as a man of his word made him a natural leader and a trusted messenger. As we leave him now, picture him at the end of a long day. The apprentices have cleaned the workshop, the fire is banked. He holds up a newly finished silver creamer, turning it in the flickering candle light, inspecting the gleam of the polish and the precision of the engraving. The fame of his midnight ride is still years in the future. For now, he is a master of his craft, a provider for his family, a respected man in a city simmering with quiet tension. His legacy was being built not yet on horseback, but here in the patient, meticulous, and demanding world of the workshop. Paul Revere's workshop, with its gleaming silver, represented the height of colonial craftsmanship. The light that shone on his work, however, often came from the humble, smoky tallow candles made by his neighbor, the chandler. These were the lights of the common man. But for the wealthy elite of Boston, for those who lived in grand townhouses and wanted to fill their parlors with a cleaner, brighter, and more prestigious glow, tallow simply would not do. They sought a superior substance, an almost magical wax that produced a brilliant, smokeless light considered the finest in the world. To find its source, we must leave the narrow streets of Boston behind. We must turn our gaze to the sea and embark on a journey into the deep, dark waters of the Atlantic. We are going in search of the strange and vital secret ingredient that truly lit the 18th century. The finest candle in the 18th century was not made of beeswax, which was expensive and often reserved for the church. It was made from a substance called spermaceti. This was a pure, pearly white, waxy material that produced a clear, bright, steady flame with almost no smoke or unpleasant odor. Its light was so consistent that it was even adopted as the scientific standard for measuring luminosity, the candle power. But its origin was, for a time, a source of mystery and wonder. Spermaceti is found in only one place in the natural world, the head of a sperm whale. The whale has a massive organ in its forehead, known as the spermaceti organ or case, which can contain hundreds of gallons of a semi-liquid waxy oil. Scientists today believe this organ helps the whale control its buoyancy during deep dives and may function as a kind of biological sonar. But for the whalers of the 18th century, it was simply a treasure chest. Imagine a whaling ship from Nantucket or New Bedford, months out at sea. These were not grand naval vessels, but tough, utilitarian ships stained with soot and reeking of oil. When a sperm whale was successfully hunted and brought alongside, the most perilous work began. The crew would embark on the messy, dangerous process of cutting in. Men would stand on precarious platforms, using long-handled spades to strip the thick blanket of blubber from the whale's carcass. But the real prize was the head. An opening was cut into the whale's massive forehead, and a crewman would be lowered into the cavity with a bucket. Here, surrounded by the strange oily wax, he would bail out the precious contents, bucket by bucket, onto the deck. This raw mixture of spermaceti and whale oil was then processed on board, in large cauldrons called tripods that were set into a brick furnace on the deck. The ship became a floating factory, rendering the blubber and purifying the spermaceti oil under a perpetual cloud of black, greasy smoke. This transatlantic trade was a cornerstone of the New England economy. Ships would be gone for years at a time, traveling to the far corners of the globe. The whale oil and spermaceti they brought back were not just for local use, they were major exports, lighting the great cities of Europe as well as the homes of Boston's elite. Back on land, in specialized refineries, the final transformation took place. The crude spermaceti oil was chilled during the winter months or in cellars, causing the pure spermaceti wax to crystallize and separate from the liquid oil. This raw wax was then pressed in heavy screw presses to squeeze out the remaining oil, a process that was repeated multiple times. Finally, the wax was boiled with an alkaline solution which purified it, and then it was cast into large, pristine white blocks. This was the raw material for the spermaceti candle. The candle-making process itself was similar to that for tallow, often using molds to achieve a perfect, smooth finish, but the result was vastly different. A spermaceti candle was a symbol of wealth and status. It burned with a light that was almost modern in its clarity, transforming a dim room into a brightly lit space suitable for reading, card games, or intricate sewing. Its cost was many times that of a tallow candle, placing it firmly in the realm of luxury. Liquid whale oil, a byproduct of this process, also became essential. It was the fuel for a new kind of lamp, the argon lamp, which was invented in the late 18th century and produced a light far brighter than any candle. Whale oil lit the lighthouses that guided ships into Boston Harbor, and the street lamps that made the city's main thoroughfares safer at night. In a very real sense, the entire colonial world was illuminated by the whale. This reliance on a single, hunted creature created its own strange rituals and economies. The quality of light in your home was a direct reflection of your wealth. You might have a few precious spermaceti candles for the parlor where guests were entertained, while using cheaper tallow candles or simple slut lamps, a rag and a dish of grease in the kitchens and servants' quarters. The act of lighting a spermaceti candle was an act of conspicuous consumption. The ritual of trimming its wick with special silver scissors, or extinguishing its flame with an elegant silver snuffer, was part of the theater of an elite household. It was a quiet declaration of one's place in the world, a status symbol that was both beautifully practical and profoundly expensive. And so, this secret ingredient, harvested from the depths of the ocean through a dangerous and arduous process, connected the parlors of Boston to the far-flung hunting grounds of the Atlantic and Pacific. It was a global trade that brought a new quality of light to the 18th century, a light that was clean, bright, and born from the immense and mysterious creature that was the sperm whale. The tallow candle, with its smoky, greasy light, defined the world of the common artisan. The spermaceti candle, born of the ocean's depths, cast a brilliant, clean glow that spoke of wealth and global trade. The quality of light in a colonial home was not just a practical matter. It was a clear and visible dividing line between the classes. We have spent our time in the workshops amidst the tools and the grime of honest labor. Now, for our final segment, we will cross the threshold from the world of work into the world of leisure. We will leave the chandler and the silversmith behind and step into the carefully curated space where their finest products were consumed. We enter a colonial lady's parlor to see how wealth, wax drips, and wainscoting shape the rhythm of an entirely different kind of life. Imagine yourself now not as a maker, but as a guest. You are stepping into the front parlor of a prosperous merchantess home in the heart of Boston. The first thing you notice is the quality of the light. It is late afternoon and the sun is low, but the room is filled with a soft, pervasive glow. This is not the flickering, uncertain light of a single tallow candle. Here, multiple spermaceti candles in polished silver or brass candlesticks stand on the mantelpiece and side tables. They're bright, steady flames banishing the shadows to the far corners of the room. The room itself is a statement of taste and order. The walls are not rough plaster, but are covered in elegant wood paneling or wainscoting, painted a fashionable pale blue or green. Perhaps one wall is even covered in expensive, hand-printed wallpaper imported from England. The floor is made of wide, polished wooden planks, partially covered by a fine woven rug. The furniture a mahogany tea table with delicate cabriole legs, upholstered chairs. A tall case clock ticking softly in the corner all speaks of wealth and refinement. This is a space designed not for labor, but for social performance. The lady of the house presides over this domain. Her life, in stark contrast to that of the tradesman, is governed by a different set of routines. Her day is not one of physical production, but of social management and the curation of her family's status. Her morning might be spent consulting with a cook about the evening meal, or instructing her servants on the proper way to polish the silver. Her afternoons, however, are for society. This parlor is her stage. This is where she receives visitors, solidifying the social networks that are as crucial to her husband's business as any contract. At around 3 or 4 o'clock, the ritual of tea would begin. Imagine the scene. The tea table is brought to the center of the room. Upon it is placed the finest porcelain tea set, the silver sugar tongs perhaps crafted by Paul Revere, and the tea caddy containing a precious supply of black tea. The conversation is as carefully managed as the room's decor. It is a gentle ballet of local news, commentary on fashion, discussion of a recent sermon, and, of course, a healthy measure of gossip. Who is courting whom? Which merchant has just received a fine shipment of silk? The ability to engage in witty, informed, and discreet conversation was a vital skill for a colonial lady. The bright, even light of the spermaceti candles was essential for this ritual, allowing guests to appreciate the fine details of the porcelain and, more importantly, to read the subtle facial expressions of their companions. As evening deepens, the candles become even more central. Parlor might be rearranged for a game of cards, whist, or quadrille were popular. A multi-branched candelabra would be placed on the card table, its combined flames creating a bright pool of light for the players. Even here, etiquette was paramount. A careless guest might let wax drip onto the expensive playing cards or the polished mahogany. Table, a minor but noticeable social faux pas. The constant, low-level maintenance of the light trimming the wicks, ensuring the candles burned evenly was a quiet, background task, often performed by a servant, but overseen by the lady of the house. The cost of this light was always a silent consideration. To light a room so lavishly was a display. It signaled that one could afford to, quite literally, burn money. The number of candles lit was a measure of the importance of the occasion and the guests. A simple family evening might require only a few, while a grand ball would see the entire house ablaze, with hundreds of candles, their light glinting off mirrors and silver, creating a dazzling effect that was meant to impress. This world of leisure, made possible by the bright flame of a spermaceti candle, stands in the starkest contrast to the world of our chandler. For him, a candle was the end product of a long day of smelly, repetitive labor. For the lady in her parlor, that same object was merely a prerequisite for her own form of work, the delicate and demanding performance of colonial high society. His life was defined by the struggle to create light. Hers was defined by the opportunities that abundant light provided, and so, our exploration of colonial Boston comes to an end. We began in the humble, breezy workshop of a tallow chandler, surrounded by the rhythm of a grueling, essential routine. We moved to the studio of a master silversmith, where precision and artistry laid the groundwork for a revolutionary future. We journeyed out onto the vast ocean to discover the secret of the whale, the creature that provided the fuel for a new kind of brilliance. And finally, we sat in a warmly lit parlor, where that light was consumed in the quiet rituals of gossip and card games. The simple candle, an object we barely think of today, was the thread that connected all these worlds. It was a product of labor, a symbol of status, a tool of artistry, and a necessity for life after sunset. Its gentle, flickering flame measured the hours, divided the classes, and created the very atmosphere of an era. As you rest here now in a world illuminated by a simple switch, let the memory of that olden light fade. The smell of tallow, the tapping of the silversmith's hammer, the vastness of the sea, they are all just quiet stories now. The pressures and rituals of that time have dissolved, leaving only the peace and comfort of this present moment. There are no wicks to trim, no candles to budget. There is only the darkness of your room, a welcome and gentle friend, inviting you into a deep and restful sleep.